Almost everyone has looked into the night sky and thought about space.
But when we hear the word space, what do we think of?
Stars, planets, sun, moons, rockets.
Rockets, exactly. Over the years, companies like NASA and SpaceX have been working on the future of space exploration.
But space exploration isn't just about landing on the moon and defying gravity. It's about much, much more.
In the 1930s and 1940s, Nazi Germany took the chance to use rockets at long range as weapons.
Near the end of World War II, Germany fired rockets over the English Channel at London at over 3,500 miles per hour. And after World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union took the Nazis' idea and made it their own.
On October the 4th in 1957, coincidentally my birthday, the Soviets launched the first man-made satellite into space. It was called the Sputnik 1.
On April 12, 1961, 4 years later, Russian Lieutenant Yuri Gagarin became the first human to circle the Earth and orbit. He made this journey in the Vostok 1, and the flight lasted 108 minutes, or 1 hour and 48 minutes.
The Americans were doing the same, and on January 31st, 1958, the Explorer 1 went into Earth's orbit. 3 years later, Alan Shepard became the first American to travel in space.
Making progress quickly, they launched John Glenn into orbit on February 20th, 1962, making the Russians and Americans equal in the race for space exploration.
The first US human spaceflight program was Project Mercury. It spanned 5 years, starting in 1958 and finishing in 1963. NASA were eager to put a man into orbit of the Earth before the Soviet Union.
NASA's second human spaceflight program was Project Gemini, starting in 1961 and finishing in 1966, the very same year that the Apollo program started. The Gemini spacecraft carried 2 astronauts. Altogether, there were 10 Gemini missions and 16 astronauts, among which were Neil Armstrong of Apollo 11 and Jim Lovell of Apollo 13, that flew the low Earth orbit, or LEO, missions during 1965 and 1966. Apollo 1, initially called AS-204, was the first manned mission of the NASA Apollo program. This program had intentions to put man on the moon. This particular mission was planned as the first low Earth orbital test of the Apollo Command and Service module.
It was due to launch on the 21st of February. However, tragically, a cabin fire occurred when rehearsing the launch and killed all three crew members, Virgil Grissom, Ed White, and Roger B. Chaffee. The name Apollo 1 was chosen by the crew and made official by NASA after the accident.
Due to the fact that the rocket had no fuel in it, the test had not been considered hazardous, and the emergency preparedness for it was poor.
Apollo 8 was the first manned spacecraft to leave low Earth orbit and get to the moon. They orbited the moon before returning to Earth with its 3 crewmen, Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, and William Anders.
For 6 days, 3 hours and 42 seconds. Whilst orbiting the moon, the crew did a television broadcast on Christmas Eve, reading the first 10 pages of the Book of Genesis. Apollo 11 was a space exploration mission that marked the first space launch from a celestial body, NASA.
It made history by putting man on the moon for the very first time, a massive breakthrough in space exploration.
As Neil Armstrong quite rightly said, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Exactly. Apollo 13 was the 7th mission from the Apollo series, starting and ending in 1970. It was due to be the 3rd rocket to land on the moon, though after a routine oxygen tank stir, there was an explosion on board just 2 days into the mission.
The crew diverted back to Earth, looping around the moon and using the lunar module, or LM for short, as a lifeboat, as the command module's life support systems were inoperative.
Luckily, all the crew returned to Earth alive and very relieved.
Salyut 1 was the first ever space station in history and was launched into low Earth orbit by the Soviet Union on the 19th of April 1971.
The Salyut program followed this with 5 more launches of 7 more space stations.
The Space Shuttle operated from 1981 to 2011 by NASA as part of the Space Transportation System (STS) program.
The first test flight occurred in 1981, leading to operational flights beginning in 1982.
5 complete space shuttles were built and they flew a total of 135 missions.
During the Space Shuttle program, the Hubble Space Telescope was launched, as well as the International Space Station. On the 30th of May 2020, the organisation SpaceX became the first private company to send astronauts into space. The Crew Demo 2 successfully launched 2 astronauts into space, orbiting the Earth on a mission to the International Space Station.
Commander Douglas Hurley and Joint Operations Commander Robert Behnken became the first people launched into space by a private company. The mission marks the return of America's famous manned space program since it ended in 2011, roughly 10 years ago.
The future of space exploration will include both robotic spacecraft and human spaceflight because of the advancement in technology that we have made.
We are supposedly going to land on the moon again by 2024 and reach Mars by 2030 to build scientific outposts that will later enable us to make settlements.
Further in the future, we may build settlements on other planets and their moons, as well as making mining and fueling outposts, particularly in the asteroid belt.
Physical exploration outside the solar system will be robotic for the foreseeable future, as it is safer and easier to gather information about the universe, its conditions, and quite possibly its inhabitants.